Shadrach Tyrion was born on September 7, 1997, in Green Bay, Wisconsin. His parents were Tara Pinich and Michael Tyrion. Following his parents' separation, Tara started dating a man named Steve. Shad's family consisted of his parents, two sisters named Ava Weoj and Svea Suner Tyrion, and a brother named Bo Smith. During his childhood, Shad attended Howard and SWO schools before eventually joining the family business with his father and grandfather. Shad was a lively person who loved camping, gaming, and spending time with his family. He had a talent for wood carving and was recognized for his kindness and compassion, always putting others' needs first. His tragic end is particularly poignant considering his empathetic nature and tight-knit family. On February 23, 2022, as night fell, Shad told his family he was going out to meet two friends. His parents bid him goodbye around 9:30 p.m. Unbeknownst to them, danger awaited. Later that night, Shad's mother Tara returned, went to bed, unaware that Shad had already come home with Taylor and was in the basement. Early in the morning, Tara woke up to the sound of the front door closing as Taylor left. Worried, she went downstairs, called for her son, and, getting no response, decided to check the basement. Inside, she found a bucket covered with a rag. Removing it, she made a horrifying discovery: her son's head was inside. Shocked, she called police immediately. Upon deeper investigation, authorities found Shad's body parts in a bucket. Detectives checked Shad's phone records and discovered that on February 23rd, he had planned to meet two people, Taylor Schabeisnes and Alexander Gannon. Taylor had picked up Shad to hang out at her place. After receiving a statement from Shad's mother, Tara, the police questioned Taylor Schabeisnes and Alexander Gannon at their homes. Taylor resided in a house owned by her friend, Scott Thomas, which they shared. Bloody footprints near Taylor's minivan at her place led the detectives to her apartment, where they decided to question Taylor further. Taylor complained about the dirty environment on camera, showing her indifference towards her actions towards Shad. The detective then asked her about her relationship with Shad, to which Taylor revealed he was her ex-boyfriend. She admitted to meeting Shad on February 23rd in her apartment, where Scott was also present. Scott was there when the police came to arrest Taylor, and she mentioned that the minivan belonged to Scott. Taylor was questioned about the activities of the three friends that night herself, Shad and Alexander Gannon. She readily admitted to smoking marijuana together. She said that she was giving Shad a haircut while the three of them smoked. But after some time, Alexander Gannon decided to go home, saying it was late. After Alexander Gannon left, Taylor and Shad decided to go to Shad's house, where he told her that his mother were going to be arriving home late. They went to Shad's house and consumed crystal methamphetamine. She also confessed to stealing trazodone from her friend Scott's drawer, and they both injected it using a needle. Taylor's admission of using drugs that night suggested that she might have a history of substance abuse, which added another complex layer to this case. The detective recognized that Taylor was under the influence of drugs during the questioning, but continued with the interrogation without hesitation. Taylor confessed to detective that Shad's remains were still in the basement. The detective further pressed her, asking for details about what exactly happened to Shad, but Taylor replied that she had blacked out after drinking and smoking for some time. This time, even though Taylor tried to find a way out by attempting to lie, she quickly realized that her tactics weren't working, and she had no other option except to confess. Later in the interview, Taylor admitted that she and Shad had been intimate that night, and there were also toys and other props involved, including a choke collar. As the interrogation continued, detective questioned her about the chains and other toys that they had found at the scene. Taylor admitted that she loved to strangle Shad, and he enjoyed it too. This reveals her sadistic and violent tendencies. When the detective continued asking Taylor where the other body parts were, she displayed a slight sense of regret for not bringing Shad's head with her. However, Taylor was not remorseful for her actions. Instead, she was dejected because of the mistake she'd made in leaving Shad's head in his basement, which eventually led the police to her. She provided clear answers to the detective, stating that some of Shad's body parts were inside the van, while the others remained in the basement. Her lack of remorse after committing such a heinous crime was startling. This might stem from a disturbed psyche or a potential mental health condition that hinders her ability to experience any emotions related to this atrocious crime. Another possibility is that she may have been under the influence of drugs, which could have prompted her to act on intrusive thoughts. However, the detectives were yet to uncover the whole truth. During the interrogation, she giggled often and laughed while giving details about the events of that night. Detective asked her that, "Remember what happened with Shad?" She said that here comes the chain, and then he put it around his neck while they were playing around, and this shows again that Taylor did not understand how serious her actions were when she brutally dismembered her ex-partner. The detective saw Taylor's brutal and sadistic side when she said that she loved watching Shad's internal organs as she dismembered him with kitchen knives. She also added, in an almost casual tone, that she got lazy that night and didn't bother dismembering and moving all the body parts to her apartment. Taylor's casual behavior and detachment from the crime she just committed made the detective question whether she had intended for Shad to die from the beginning. When questioned about this, Taylor answered no, but there was no hint of remorse or repentance in her voice. She continued to describe the events of the night as if she were having a casual conversation, which slowly started to suggest that she may be dealing with mental health issues. Taylor confessed to strangling Shad with chains, finding pleasure in the act, and continuing even after Shad's death. She claimed an irresistible urge to kill those she loved too much, proving her awareness of Shad's murder. Taylor also admitted to engaging in sexual acts with Shad's corpse, displaying necrophiliac tendencies. Taylor expressed regret for not taking any drugs after the process, as she knew it would have helped her calm down. She admitted to feeling frustrated while dismembering Shad and cleaning up the mess, but she said she enjoyed the process. After confessing to the crime, Taylor briefly diverted the conversation by saying she messed up and didn't intend for those things to happen. However, while reenacting the scene of her strangling Shad that night, she was observed laughing without any hint of guilt or remorse in her voice, a clear indication of a person with a distorted psychological state. When the detective asked why Taylor didn't call for the police or an ambulance, she genuinely felt remorseful for her actions. Taylor did admit that she had considered it, but she was experiencing irrational thoughts after the murder. During another interrogation, the detective asked Taylor how she dismembered Shad's body, and Taylor proceeded to provide a vivid description of the gruesome act that took place that night. Her description of the details was more akin to reliving those moments to experience the thrill again. Taylor Denise Coronado, born in Evan, Illinois in November 1997 to parents Maria and Arturo Coronado, moved to Wisconsin with her family when she was in the 4th grade. Later in life, she married Warren Shabuznes, who was incarcerated at the time of the incident. They had a 2-year-old son named Mato. Despite this, Taylor engaged in sexual activities with her ex-partner, Shad Tyrion, after committing a gruesome crime. The police were aware that Taylor had significant mental health issues and desperately needed psychological assistance. They were certain that she was fully aware of her actions when she committed the crime, as she admitted multiple times that she enjoyed the act of dismembering Shad's body. Taylor also confessed to playing with the deceased Shad, using various toys, as well as performing oral acts on him. This deeply disturbed not only the investigators, but also the people around the world, who began to question the lack of humanity in individuals like Taylor Shabuznes. Taylor was arrested on February 23, 2022, for murdering and dismembering her ex-lover, Shad Tyrion. On July 24, 2022, the trial of Taylor Shabs began. Considering the gravity of the crime, the court had to determine if Taylor was sane during the time of the crime and if she knew her actions were wrong. During the trial, Taylor's grandmother testified that Taylor had a very difficult childhood. She lost her mother at an early age and her father remarried. Taylor also lost her brother, Arturo Coronado Jr., in a motorcycle accident in 2021. Her husband, Warren Shabuznes, who also defended her in court, was already in for illegally distributing meth. Taylor's grandmother added that 24 hours after Taylor's son was born, he was taken away by Child Protective Services, but she and her husband were fighting for custody of their grandson Mato. Growing up in such a toxic environment, Taylor had dealt with depression and bipolar disorder. The grandmother stated that Taylor needed psychological help and another chance to live her life. When Taylor's 51-year-old father, Arturo Coronado, came to give his testimony, he too had to be transported from prison, where he was serving a sentence for second-degree assault of a child. His testimony revealed that Taylor had some issues during her high school years. As a way to address these issues, her father sent her to live with her grandparents in Texas, where she eventually graduated. He also stated that shortly before Mato was born, Taylor was admitted to the Nicollet Psychiatric Center due to hallucinations and suicidal thoughts. The father added that Taylor was doing relatively well until her husband came into the picture and got her addicted to drugs. Similarly, when Taylor and Shad's mutual friend, Alexander Gannon, came to testify, Taylor continued to giggle and laugh throughout his testimony. Alexander confirmed that he had known Taylor and Shad since they attended Bellevue Middle School together and that the two were dating back then. He also provided his account of the day of the murder, stating that he was with them at Taylor's apartment, drinking, and left around 1 or 2 a.m. as it was getting late. Alexander further mentioned that he had tried to contact Shad the next day, but received no response. Taylor was seen wearing a spit guard, usually used for those attempting to spit on officers or court personnel during his next court appearance. Taylor's second cousin, Valerie, and some of his more distant relatives showed up to testify that while Taylor needed psychological treatment at the moment, he should be given another chance in the future. Shad's uncle, Kelly Tyrion, made a rather emotional statement. He emphasized the point that everyone goes through tough times in their lives, but that's no excuse for murdering someone so brutally, and her mental health issues shouldn't be a reason for the possibility of parole. When it was Shad's father, Michael Tyrion's turn, he made a surprising statement by forgiving Taylor for his actions. Michael expressed his forgiveness towards Taylor, acknowledging that he had made a regrettable decision that he now had to live with. He also shared fond memories of Shad, describing him as a kind and happy child. Despite the gravity of Taylor's actions, Michael extended forgiveness and expressed hope for Taylor's future. He mentioned the possibility of requesting the judge to consider allowing Taylor to re-enter society at some point, emphasizing that everyone makes mistakes and has the potential to change for the better. Michael chose not to harbor hatred towards Taylor, recognizing his humanity and wishing him well. Finally, the assistant district attorney, Caleb Saunders, concluded that what Taylor did to Shad was not due to substance abuse or mental health issues. She simply committed the crime because she enjoyed it. He added that Taylor's lack of remorse should earn her the highest possible sentence for this terrible crime. The defense attorney, Christopher Frolick, said that Taylor was not a lost cause or a monster, and despite having committed this irreversible and horrible crime, she should be given a second chance. He also classified the entire murder as an honest mistake. However, when he asked for a possible extension of the trial, the outburst displayed by Taylor in the court provided a clear indication to everyone that she was not merely a victim of substance abuse, but rather someone who was dealing with significant issues that required immediate attention. The trial concluded on September 26, 2022, where Judge Thomas Walsh sentenced Taylor Shabs to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. This case shocked the entire world, as people were bewildered by how inhumanely Taylor had dismembered her former lover, Shad Tyrion. What's even more shocking was that the person showed no remorse or guilt for the horrible crime they committed. This raised questions about the state of humanity and society in the current time. Shad's family and friends came together to pray for his soul and spoke about how they'll never be able to heal from this tragic incident. It was also shocking that even after knowing the gravity of the crime committed by Taylor, her family was ready to defend her and blame her upbringing for the crime that she committed. Today's case was truly a disturbing one. It makes one question the lack of humanity and empathy in people like Taylor, who can easily dismember a person that once trusted her. It also highlights that strained family relationships and lack of parental guidance in a child's life when they're growing up can indeed create a monster like Taylor Shabs. Mid-July 1980 was the peak of the American summer. As the rest of the country battled the heat, law enforcement officials in Kern and Ventura County, Central California, were left to deal with 2 homicides occurring within days of each other on July 15th and 18th. It was a murder mystery that remained unsolved for decades before DNA technology provided the missing links that gave investigators the edge needed to catch a depraved killer. But who were the victims? and how were they connected? Hello and welcome back to Mysterious Hook. Today, we go back in time to 1980s California and the intertwined cases of the Kern County and Ventura County Jane Does. Sun, sand, surf, and mountains. From golden shores to glamorous cities, California has it all and more. The West Coast state is undeniably a year-round attraction for tourists from all over the world. Whether you want to enjoy an afternoon taking in the bustling atmosphere of Venice Beach, or spend a day rubbing shoulders with celebrities in sun-kissed Los Angeles as you stroll down the Walk of Fame, California has a little something for everyone. But despite its magnetic charm, California also has its share of dark history. And today, we take a look at two such mysteries. On the morning of July 15, 1980, a group of maintenance workers in Delano, California made their way through the almond orchard for another day of work. As they approached the 13th row of trees, they took notice of what appeared to be a person curled up in a fetal position asleep on the ground. Curiosity compelled them to inspect further, and what they discovered left them reeling and rushing off to contact police immediately. It was the body of a woman who had clearly been murdered. Teams of investigators and crime scene technicians arrived at the almond plantation and began cordoning off the area to begin their investigation. The woman appeared to be of either Native American or Hispanic descent. Investigators immediately noted the lack of blood at the scene and soon found tire tracks that led up to and then away from where the body was found. Another clue was a discarded Michelob beer bottle. They theorized that their victim may have been picked up from a bar known as Ruby's located in Lemoore, an hour away from the farm. Their investigation began immediately as they searched the plantation for clues to her identity. Detectives were dispatched to Ruby's to question staff and patrons of the identity of the woman or any suspicious activity while other teams combed through the fields. By the afternoon, investigators had not found any of her personal belongings, and the people that were questioned by detectives were unable to provide much information about the woman. The body was transported to the county mortuary for a post-mortem examination. Examiners determined she had been murdered a day before being discovered. She had been assaulted before being stabbed. It was overkill, with a total of 27 stab wounds, 18 to the chest, and 9 defensive wounds on her arms and shoulders. For investigators, it was obvious she fought fiercely against her attacker. Her cause of death was recorded as sharp force trauma as her vital organs had been punctured. Without any form of identification, her fingerprints were taken and sent to the crime lab. However, after running her prints through various databases, there were no records found. The coroner began examining the body for clues that investigators could use in trying to identify her. She had 2 unique tattoos. One was a heart with the words "I love you," "Shirley," and "Seattle." The other simply read "Mother" and "I love you." Scars were found on her abdomen, which the examiner believed may have come from an operation or childbirth, and there was scarring on her buttocks. She also wore a prosthetic left leg due to an injury on her upper leg. Her entire set of upper teeth were missing and showed signs of being removed medically. The toxicology report showed that she had been intoxicated with a blood alcohol level of 0.3%. This strengthened the theory that she was possibly picked up from the bar Ruby's. A detailed profile was developed based on the examiner's findings. She was estimated to be between the ages of 25 to 35 and weighed 115 pounds with a height of 5 feet and 4 inches. She had black hair that was slightly curled and was of Native American descent. Her body showed signs of possibly having given birth at least once. The tattoos suggested that she was a native of Seattle, Washington, and that Shirley was either her real name or that of someone she loved dearly. The clothes she was wearing at the time of her death were a pink top, blue jeans, white shoes, and blue socks. Her body was kept in the county mortuary until she could properly be identified and was given the placeholder name of Kern County Jane Doe. Investigators had also lifted fingerprints from the discarded beer bottle found at the scene and made plaster impressions of the tire tracks found near the victim's body. The forensics team had also taken the clothes of the victim and were able to extract biological material from the items. They also commissioned the medical examiner to provide the nail clippings of the victim in order to test for possible DNA that may have been transferred during the attack. These were all sent for DNA profiling while the investigation continued. But she was just the first victim in what was going to become a decades-long mystery. 3 days after the discovery of the Kern County Jane Doe, law enforcement officials were alerted to another murder in neighboring Ventura County. The body of another female was discovered in the Thousand Oaks High School parking lot on July 18, 1980 in Westlake. When investigators arrived, they noted that the woman was either of Native American or Hispanic descent. She had been partially disrobed and had several visible defensive wounds on her arms. A search of the crime scene indicated that she was murdered elsewhere, as there was no significant amount of blood near the scene. It was also believed that she was brought to the parking lot and dragged from a vehicle, as there was a trail of blood from the edge of the tarmac surface to where the body was found. Investigators were aware that a similar attack had occurred 3 days prior in neighboring Kern County. Although the similarities were striking between both crime scenes, at the time investigators did not believe they were linked. A search of the nearby area provided no clues for investigators, as there were no tire tracks to be found and no personal belongings of the victim located near the crime scene. The school custodian who had found the body was questioned, but he could not provide any further details except that he had found her while going about his general duties at the school. It was unmistakable to investigators at the time that she was also pregnant. Her body was sent off to the county coroner for further examination. At the coroner's office, the medical examiner determined that the victim had been killed 12 hours before her body was discovered. She had been stabbed 16 times and then strangled to death. The victim had also suffered a brutal assault. The wounds on her arms showed that she had fought her attacker to the very end. The coroner determined that she was between the age range of 20 to 30. Her estimated height was between 5 feet 1 to 5 feet 3 inches and weighed between 100 to 115 pounds. The coroner provided investigators with a detailed profile that included her description and distinguishable marks on her body. The victim was primarily Native American with some Hispanic, Caucasian, Sub-Saharan, and Asian ancestry. She had brown eyes, black hair with bleach blonde tips and penciled eyebrows, as she had shaved her natural brows off. She had a large amount of dental work done and also had pierced ears. She had several scars and birthmarks, including 2 vaccination scars on her left arm and a scar on the left knee. They were able to determine that she was 5 months pregnant with a male child. The baby had appeared to be well-nourished and received proper prenatal care prior to the attack. An episiotomy scar also suggested she may have given birth to at least 1 child before this. Her fingerprints were taken and a search through national databases came up empty. Like the Kern County Jane Doe, she too had no criminal history. The victim had been clothed in a white t-shirt, black bra, white underwear, and red pants. These, along with her fingernail clippings, were all taken and sent off to extract any foreign DNA that could be used to identify her murderer. DNA had also been extracted from the unborn child to conduct a paternity test. While investigators waited on the results, the county coroner gave her the placeholder name Ventura County Jane Doe. Over the next few weeks, authorities in both Kern County and Ventura County worked extensively to uncover the identities of both women. Kern County officials revisited the bar and interviewed more people in and around the area. Investigators also made use of the local media to appeal to anyone who may have known either Jane Doe. It was then that they received a tip from an anonymous female caller who alleged to have known the woman found in the orchard. According to the caller, she went by the name Becky or Rebecca Ochoa, had tattoos similar to that of the victim, and she worked as a waitress at a bar. However, this tip led nowhere. Other people came forward claiming that she had been seen in and around Lemoore for several weeks before her death. According to these witnesses, the victim had worked at a local apple orchard as a farmhand. This lead, too, failed to produce any useful information in the end. Investigators then took to visiting local tattoo parlors, hoping they would recognize the work and be able to identify the victim. A tattoo artist from Bakersfield said that he did not know the work personally, but provided details to a Los Angeles tattoo parlor that used a similar technique in their designs. He also explained that the area had a large community of Native Americans. Following this lead, detectives set off for Los Angeles. After questioning the artists in the parlor, they realized that their Jane Doe did not have any links to the area, and they were now back at square one. In Ventura County, detectives worked with the theory that their Jane Doe had been kidnapped while hitchhiking near the College of Sequoias in Visalia, California. Investigators also used the media as a way to discover more information about their victim. But unlike the Kern County Jane Doe, no one seemed to recall their victim. Her dental records were distributed to several dental labs, but there was still no match. Without any new leads, these avenues were quickly drying up. Investigators' hopes were dashed again when the paternity tests from the unborn child also proved to be a dead end. The DNA extracted from the unborn child was used to create a profile that could be linked to existing criminal profiles of the Cody's database. However, it seemed that the child's father did not have a criminal history. DNA testing was still in its infancy in the 1980s, and investigators had exhausted every lead possible in trying to identify both women. Both the Jane Does were buried in county cemeteries, but their stories were not forgotten by the investigators who continued to work to restore their identities. The foreign DNA from both women was discovered to be that of an unknown male. Investigators, though, continued to keep both investigations separate, believing the murders were pure coincidence. This was filed away, and over the next 30 years, DNA results would periodically be submitted by investigators, who were given the reins of the cold cases in both counties. A fresh set of eyes meant a new approach to the case. Investigators were sure that the murderer would have committed more crimes since 1980. With technological advancements, it was possible their suspect was now on their systems. In 2008, Kern County officials were finally able to find a match to the DNA recovered from their Jane Doe. It had been linked to a 51-year-old man named Wilson Chuist, who was already in custody in California. Wilson Claude Chuist Jr. was born on December 2, 1951, in New Orleans, Louisiana. According to reports, Wilson's childhood was tough, as his parents were always at odds with each other. When he was younger, Wilson had a desire to become a priest. But after being expelled from a Catholic school for beating another student, those ambitions were dashed. He soon gave in to the darker side of life and began abusing drugs. At the age of 18, he enrolled in the army, but was discharged after being deemed unsuitable for service. After returning home, Wilson decided to get married and settle down in Los Angeles in 1969. The couple seemed happy enough and even had a daughter, but cracks in the marriage appeared as Wilson turned to a life of crime. His first major crime occurred in October 1977. He had given a lift to a young woman who had been standing on the side of a road in Los Angeles. Once she got in, he then abducted her and drove her to a remote location. Wilson then assaulted her and attempted to strangle her to death. He assumed she died after she had fallen unconscious. After he left her body in a ditch, she regained her senses and immediately reported him to the nearest police station. Unable to escape the charges, Wilson made a deal with the prosecutors and was charged with abduction in November 1977. He was paroled in June 1980. It wouldn't last long, though. In August 1980, just 2 months after his release, he committed a robbery. That same month, he attempted to abduct another woman outside the College of Sequoias in Visalia. He had threatened her with violence if she refused to cooperate, but his plan was foiled by 2 witnesses who were walking by at the same time. In September 1980, he went on to abduct and assault another woman who he released after she told him she was married. He was ultimately caught and convicted for all 3 crimes. He was sentenced to 12 years to life in prison that same year. Wilson, though, was paroled in 2004 after serving 24 years, but the committee reversed their decision after concluding that he showed no remorse. He was, however, eligible for another parole hearing in 2016. While still behind bars, investigators were able to link Wilson's DNA to that of the DNA profile recovered from the Kern County Jane Doe. However, he was not immediately charged, and there was never a reason given for this. In 2012, having heard how officials in Kern County linked Wilson to an unsolved murder from July 1980, Ventura County officials submitted the DNA profile of their cold case suspect to Cody's to test against any possible matches to convicts already on the system. In January 2013, they had a match. Their Jane Doe had also been linked to Wilson Chuist through DNA found on her clothes and fingernails. It baffled investigators in both counties as they had spent all these years investigating both cases whose similarities were striking but never linked. The fight for justice, though, was far from over. Although DNA had linked Wilson to both murders, it had still not been able to identify both the Jane Does. When the case was brought to the district attorney's office in Ventura County, one of the attorneys opted not to pursue the cold case with unknown victims. Senior Deputy District Attorney John Barrick, though, was not willing to give up. He wanted to prosecute Wilson for the murders of both Kern County and Ventura County Jane Does. Under the laws of murder, I don't have to prove their identity. I just have to prove that they're a human being. I thought it was worth the effort because if we don't, then these women will never get the justice they deserve, even if we don't know their names. And there's a good possibility that Wilson is going to get out, and that is not a person who deserves to be out among law-abiding citizens, said Barrick. While still in custody, Wilson Chuist was transferred to Ventura County on September 23, 2015, by a court order. While being held at the county jail, he was charged and arrested with 3 counts of murder, the deaths of both Jane Does and the death of the unborn child of Ventura County Jane Doe. From the outset, Wilson denied all responsibility for the assault and murders of both women. For the next 3 years, Barrick, along with several prosecutors from both Kern County and Ventura County, worked to provide a compelling argument that would see Wilson pay for his crimes. His trial began on May 14, 2018. 3 of the women who survived his attacks testified in court and described Wilson as being predatory in nature. Their testimonies were similar in the way they had been approached by Wilson and lured into his car. Another witness who came forward was Patrick Scott Bell. Patrick had been a teenager in 1980 and had often stayed with Chuist, who was a family friend. He told the court of how Wilson had confessed to him that he had killed and dumped the body of an unknown woman. He also explained that he and his brothers had helped Wilson clean his car one evening, and when confronted by their mother, Carolyn Bell lied that Wilson had hit a deer. This confession was corroborated by Carolyn Bell both in a previous interview from 2013 and in court. After the confessions, prosecutors then used physical evidence that was found at the Kern County crime scene. DNA and fingerprints taken from the discarded beer bottle had been previously matched to Wilson. The DNA extracted from the Jane Doe's clothes and fingernails also proved a positive match. Wilson's defense attorney, Andrei Ninchev, presented a weak argument by stating his client and the women had consented to intimacy. He also argued that there was no physical evidence from the Ventura County crime scene to prove Wilson was actually there. After a 2-week-long trial, Wilson was found guilty of the murders of both adult victims on May 31, 2018. The jury voted unanimously in favor of a guilty verdict. However, they could not convict him for the murder of the unborn child, as the laws referenced by the prosecution in order to find him guilty of the murder were only changed after 1994. The death penalty was not pursued due to Wilson's age and the lack of witnesses testifying on his behalf. On July 12, 2018, Wilson was sentenced to serve 2 consecutive life sentences without the possibility of parole. He is currently serving out his sentence at the California Substance Abuse Treatment Facility and State Prison in Corcoran. Although Wilson was convicted and charged in the murders of both Jane Does, it did not bring investigators any closer to giving them their names back. But DNA testing had now advanced substantially since the 1980s. In Ventura County, cold case investigator Steve Rhodes knew that a new genetic genealogy testing method was being used to identify suspects from decades-old cold cases. It had put the Golden State Killer behind bars. Could surely help identify the victims. In partnership with the DNA Doe Project, DDP, an all-volunteer group that makes use of genetic genealogy to identify John and Jane Does, both the Kern County and Ventura County officials submitted their DNA samples for genetic testing. The DDP has been credited with positively identifying a victim of serial killer John Wayne Gacy. So far, the DDP has been able to find locations and surnames of distant relatives that may be related to the Ventura County Jane Doe. These have been listed on their website and Facebook page and include Southern Texas, Central Mexico, Northern New Mexico, Indigenous California, and Guatemala. She has still not been identified by relatives. In 2021, investigators were able to find the father of her unborn child. It is believed he is an immigrant from Honduras who had ties to the Central American community within the Koreatown district of Los Angeles. Investigators were unable to make contact with him and get any information regarding their Jane Doe. They are, however, actively pursuing any leads and are urging relatives to come forward to volunteer their DNA. The Kern County Jane Doe proved a bit more difficult as the DNA retrieved had degraded over time, and it took a while to find anything that could be used. Her investigation began in May 2019. The DDP found that the victim was Indigenous, with parents likely from Maquachese, Alberta, Canada. The problem was that a very few Indigenous people had provided their DNA profiles to genealogy websites. An appeal was made on the DDP Facebook page requesting people of Indigenous ancestry to upload their DNA in order to help solve the case. This appeal was seen by Violet Susie, who had been searching for her missing aunt, Shirley and Susie, for decades. Violet submitted her DNA to GeneMatch in February 2020. After testing confirmed that Violet was in fact a close relative of the Kern County Jane Doe. The DNA Doe Project made the announcement in April 2021 that Shirley and Susie had finally been identified. She was 35 years old when she was murdered. Shirley was born on February 6, 1945, on the Samson Cree Nation Reserve in Alberta, Canada. She had 7 siblings who were all part of a close-knit family unit. Shirley was just 14 years old when her father passed away. This caused financial difficulties as the family could not handle the responsibilities of maintaining their ranch. She chose to eventually leave the reservation in search of a job to support her family. Shirley initially intended to move to the nearby city of Edmonton, but ended up moving to Vancouver, British Columbia. Here, she would eventually get married to a man named Adam Miscou in 1963 and gave birth to 2 boys and a girl. But life did not get any easier. After a turbulent few years, her marriage ended and all 3 of her children were taken away and placed in foster care before being adopted. She was unable to regain custody of her children and became homeless. Shirley turned to alcohol and substance abuse to cope with her depression. She sometimes returned to Alberta, but her family had noticed the change in her personality. The last time she was seen by her relatives was in 1977 when she returned for her brother's funeral. She expressed her desire to not return to Alberta, but did mention that she would be visiting a friend in Seattle, Washington. Allegedly, it was Shirley's mother who asked her daughter to get tattoos that would distinguish her from other people and make it easy to identify her if something happened. Shirley maintained contact with her family through letters, but that ceased after June 1980. Family members searched the Vancouver area for decades, but eventually resorted to visiting cemeteries, believing she had died. Following the discovery, Violet Susie said that she had made her grandmother a promise to find Shirley and return her to the family. Her remains were flown to Edmonton Airport on May 26, 2022. Before her casket was returned to her family, members of the Tule River Tribe of California held a ceremony with blessings and songs. Officials from the Kern County Sheriff's Office joined them in saying their final goodbye. For Violet, it was a relief to finally fulfill the promise she made. Shirley and Susie was laid to rest at her family's resting place in Riverside Cemetery on May 27, 2022. Violet now encourages Indigenous people to train in DNA research so they too can conduct their own forensic investigations. She continues to work with investigators to help other Indigenous families find their missing loved ones through a genetic genealogy database. "That is the hope I want to give to people in similar situations as mine," she said. As impossible as the task seemed in 1980, investigators' fervent pursuit of justice combined with the advancements made in DNA technology and testing has finally brought a killer to justice and peace to family who had been searching for far too long for their loved one. So far, more than half the battle has been won, but as technology progresses, hope remains in identifying the Ventura County Jane Doe. Today's case has proven that dogged determination can lead to amazing results. What are your thoughts on the progress made by technology in helping identify and bring closure to families who have spent years searching for answers about the whereabouts of their missing loved ones? The case of Patrick de la Cerda. In February 2018, the quiet town of Deltona, situated in eastern Florida near the Atlantic coast, faced a shocking incident, the brutal murder of a young man named Patrick Dara. The 25-year-old man was found dead his home. His injuries suggested a deeply personal motive behind the attack. The Patrick Dara case is emblematic of a meticulously planned crime that nearly went unsolved. Although the suspect was identified almost immediately, no direct evidence was available to confirm his guilt. Patrick Dara was born in June 1992 in Miami, Florida, a picturesque metropolitan area. Patrick grew up under the care of his father, Max Dara, originally from Spain, and his mother, Patricia Ronza, born in France but relocated to the United States in the 80s. They married soon after and started their family. The Dara family was known for being close-knit and happy. Patrick grew up surrounded by love, care, and mutual respect. A kind, intelligent, and sociable young man, he did well academically and could easily become the center of any social gathering. From childhood, he had a strong bond with his parents, who spared no effort or expense to ensure he received a good education and developed into an upstanding individual. Max Dara worked in construction and was highly regarded in his field. Although not wealthy by big city standards, the family lived comfortably. After graduating high school, Patrick chose to study construction in university, aiming to follow in his father's footsteps. While Patrick attended university, his parents decided to divorce after nearly 25 years together. Remarkably, they separated amicably without any scandals or disputes over property. His mother moved to Deltona, a quiet town on Florida's East Coast, where she soon remarried. Despite their separation, all family members remained close and maintained friendly relations. Patrick stayed with his father in Miami. They worked together and were respected professionals within the construction industry, despite their personal circumstances. They kept in regular contact, frequently calling and communicating. They were always ready to assist when necessary. Patrick often his mother in Deltona, sharing updates about his life, his joys and experiences. He delighted in telling her about meeting the girl of his dreams. Thanks to his French-Spanish heritage, Patrick had an eye-catching appearance from a young age. He was quite popular with the opposite sex, but he valued the example set by his family. Consequently, Patrick did not pursue frivolous relationships. He yearned for a meaningful connection and a strong family of his own. Patrick created an account there based on a friend's recommendation and wasn't entirely convinced it would help him find his soulmate. One evening in June 2017, while browsing through profiles without much optimism, a photo caught his eye, a captivating brunette with mesmerizing eyes and an enchanting smile. Intrigued, Patrick decided to message her. The lady in the photo was Jessica Devaney, born in 1988 in Orlando, Florida. After high school, she attended a local university where she studied banking before securing a job at a bank branch in her hometown. Jessica was immediately drawn to Patrick's profile as well. They exchanged messages on the website for several days before deciding to swap phone numbers. Over the next few weeks, they spoke every evening for hours, discussing various topics and forming a deep mutual sympathy and trust. Realizing their connection was genuine, they decided to meet in person despite living in different parts of the state. They chose a location that was roughly halfway between them for their first date. On their first date, Patrick realized that Jessica was the girl he'd been searching for all along and whom he no longer wanted to let go. She also liked him immediately, though Jessica was slightly confused by the age difference as she was 4 years older than Patrick. On his way home, Patrick called his mother to share that he had met the girl of his dreams whom he wished to marry and start a family with. Patricia heard the joy and excitement in her son's voice, recognized his seriousness, and felt happy for him. Their long-distance relationship lasted several months, presenting challenges because the couple could only see each other on weekends. They usually met somewhere neutral, renting a hotel room in a cozy, secluded place to enjoy each other's company. However, by Sunday night, they parted ways since they needed to return to work on Monday morning. In December 2017, Patrick moved to Delton where his mother lived to be closer to Jessica. He bought a house in a quiet neighborhood and began renovations to create a cozy nest for Jessica's eventual move. But Jessica couldn't leave her job immediately. Thus, they planned a housewarming party for early spring the next year. On New Year's Eve, which the couple celebrated together, Patrick prepared a surprise for Jessica. He arranged fireworks in the backyard of the house, and as she admired them, he got down on one knee and held out a box with a ring. He then asked her the most important question, whether she would become his lawful wife. Jessica felt incredibly happy and of course agreed. Patrick later admitted he'd spent considerable time searching for an engagement ring but hadn't found one perfect enough in any jeweler's store. To make sure he could propose before the new year, he chose the best available option but ordered an exclusive ring from a jewelry workshop, an original piece designed by himself. 2 months had passed since the engagement. Preparations for both the wedding and the upcoming housewarming were in full swing. The couple's choice of events had received their parents' approval, and they themselves were unspeakably happy, readying for a new stage in their lives. The young couple planned an extravagant celebration either on the shores of the Atlantic Ocean in Miami or in France, where the groom's mother originated from. On February 27, 2018, Max Dyra, Patrick's father, received a call from a courier. Max's number was listed as an additional contact. The courier reported that Patrick's order had been delivered to the specified address. However, no one opened the door or answered the phone. This was highly unusual for Patrick, prompting concern from his father. As he was occupied at work and couldn't leave to pick up the order or check on his son, Max decided to contact Jessica, his future daughter-in-law. Max called Jessica with anxiety in his voice, expressing that he couldn't reach Patrick. Jessica herself had been trying to get in touch with her fiancé since morning, but had not received any replies or calls back. Upon hearing this, Max stated that something must have happened to Patrick. Alarmed by this suggestion, Jessica dropped everything she was doing and headed toward Patrick's house as quickly as she could. Upon arriving at Patrick's house, she immediately noticed his car parked in the driveway, indicating he hadn't left home. Armed with her own key, Jessica entered the yard and called out repeatedly for her fiancé, but got no response. She cautiously opened the front door, only to be confronted by a horrifying sight. Her fiancé lay motionless near the entrance in a pool of blood. Jessica promptly called emergency services. However, paramedics who arrived on scene were unable to assist Patrick and could only declare him dead upon arrival. By the time police officers reached Patrick's residence, a heartbroken Jessica was found sobbing uncontrollably in the backyard, the very place where Patrick had proposed 2 months earlier. One of the attending officers approached her gently and began their inquiries into this tragic event. She only glanced at him and remarked that she knew who had decimated her lover and upended her entire existence, a wealthy and influential ex-boyfriend. To comprehend this perplexing case and to decipher who might want to kill a young man, who at first glance seemed to have neither adversaries nor ill wishes, it is necessary to rewind a bit to when he and Jessica initially crossed paths. At that time, Jessica was entangled in a relationship with Gregory Bender, a prosperous businessman managing his own investment fund. Jessica encountered Gregory during her college years. He was 20 years her senior and quickly mesmerized the young woman. The businessman courted her lavishly, offering extravagant gifts and taking her to upscale resorts. Jessica believed she had discovered true love. However, soon she started noticing peculiarities in his demeanor. Gregory sought to dominate every aspect of her life, vigilantly tracking where she went and whom she associated with. Their relationship persisted for almost 8 years, during which time Gregory never introduced Jessica to his family or friends. Their interactions were strictly on his terms, meeting or going on vacations only at his convenience. Rarely did he invite her over to his residence. Jessica craved a conventional family life and children. Each time she raised the subject, Bender dismissed the idea as untimely. When she attempted to end the relationship, Gregory proposed with a ring. Jessica accepted the proposal, but nothing changed. They still lived separately, only met when he needed. One day, Gregory was involved in an automobile accident that left him hospitalized. Upon hearing this news, Jessica hurried to see him, but first decided to stop by his house for some essential items for Gregory. There, Jessica encountered an unfamiliar woman and inquired about her identity. Instead of responding directly, the woman asked a similar question back. Jessica displayed the engagement ring on her finger and announced that she was the fiancée of the house's owner. In response, the woman laughed and exhibited her own ring, proclaiming herself as Bender's legal wife, Diora Sanchez Bender. Shattered by this revelation, Jessica resolved immediately to end all ties with the businessman who had deceived her for so many years. The boyfriend began to actively pursue Jessica, begging her to return and promising that he would divorce Dormora in the near future so they could get married. Jessica believed him once more. However, time passed and nothing about their relationship changed. Eventually, tired of the lack of progress, Jessica filled out a questionnaire on a dating site where she soon met Patrick. After starting to communicate with Patrick, she firmly decided to break up with Gregory and informed him of her decision. Unfortunately, Gregory did not want to let her go. He became an obsessive stalker. Initially, Bender simply persuaded Jessica to come back and try again, promising once more to divorce his wife. When persuasion failed, he moved on to threats and harassment. Realizing these tactics were ineffective, Gregory decided to find out more about his rival, Patrick, about whom he knew nothing at the time. Gregory turned to professionals who hacked into Jessica's account to uncover who she was communicating with. After discovering Patrick's identity and obtaining his contact information, Gregory began sending threatening messages demanding that Patrick break up with Jessica and referring to her as his fiancée. Patrick remained calm and unreactive to the threats, believing they would not escalate beyond verbal harassment. However, Jessica was frightened because she understood that her ex-boyfriend was capable of anything. He was a man with substantial financial resources and connections and owned a large collection of firearms. Jessica proposed breaking up with Patrick before anyone got hurt, but Patrick refused even to consider it. Consequently, they decided it was time to involve the police by providing evidence that Bender was stalking and threatening them. The couple succeeded in obtaining a restraining order against Gregory, while also requiring him to surrender all firearms stored in his home. Things calmed down for a while after this legal action. The lovers began thinking that the stalker had finally left them alone. Jessica persuaded Patrick that it was crucial to install CCTV cameras around and inside the house because she feared Gregory might violate the ban. On February 27, 2018, during the initial examination of the crime scene, criminalists immediately ruled out robbery. They noted that by the nature of the mutilation, this murder had a personal motive and that the perpetrator clearly hated his victim. The body of a 25-year-old man revealed 4 gunshot wounds, 1 in the thigh, 1 in the chest, and 2 in the head. Additionally, experts identified injuries and bruises consistent with a fall from a ladder. The body was found lying on the floor between the front door and the stairs, leading to the second floor. Investigators speculated that the killer had most likely snuck into the house and waited on the second floor. When an unsuspecting Patrick entered and climbed the stairs, he was met by his assailant. The intruder fired a bullet into Patrick's thigh, causing him to roll down the stairs. Following him down, the perpetrator fired another shot into his chest before finishing him off with 2 shots to the head. Although no murder weapon was recovered, it was determined to be a rare model of pistol that is not easy to obtain. The first shell casing was found on the second floor of the house. 2 more were found downstairs. However, a 4th shell casing was missing. Despite Jessica's statements about knowing who killed her fiancé, initial suspicion fell on Patrick's neighbor. They had a serious conflict some months prior. This neighbor was a U.S. Army veteran with combat experience who had developed a mental disorder due to severe injuries and concussions sustained during service. In December 2017, just months before, this veteran mistook his new neighbor for an intruder and opened fire, thankfully missing, but ended up hospitalized in a psychiatric facility due to an exacerbation of his condition. He was adept with firearms and could easily acquire rare gun models. This background made him a prime suspect in Patrick's murder, despite Jessica's accusations pointing elsewhere. Once he returned home, Patrick found himself constantly followed. A neighbor who struggled with mental illness was particularly suspicious of Patrick, calling him a spy and vowing to expose him. This neighbor's unhealthy imagination could indeed be a potential motive. Consequently, the authorities detained and interrogated him. The neighbor openly expressed his strong dislike for Patrick, but maintained a solid alibi at the time of the murder. Several eyewitnesses confirmed this alibi. Because these recordings were gone, it was impossible to determine who entered or exited the residence on that day. Adding to the challenge, no physical evidence was found at the crime scene. No fingerprints, shoe prints, or DNA traces. It became clear that the murder was meticulously planned. Despite their suspicions surrounding Gregory, it appeared as though he might evade justice for now. The police decided on a covert approach and asked Jessica to engage her former lover in an earnest conversation. She agreed without hesitation. Jessica called Gregory and dramatically blamed him for all that had happened. She wept and repeatedly questioned why he did it. Yet Gregory seemed to anticipate the investigators' intentions from the outset. He pretended not to understand what she meant. When Jessica accused him directly of killing her fiancé, Gregory feigned shock and offered condolences. Attempting to provoke a confession or trick him into making a mistake proved fruitless. Lacking concrete reasons to detain or further question him, police could only summon Gregory for testimony when required by law. He complied with restraining orders and appeared to have moved on from his ex-girlfriend long ago. While detectives struggled to find leads, a breakthrough came when Dora Sanchez Bender contacted them with crucial information about Patrick Darrah's case. She was promptly invited for an interview at the station where she revealed significant details occurring shortly before the crime transpired. She discovered a peculiar notebook concerning her husband's death in his office. Upon examining it, Dora found a detailed layout of an unfamiliar house and next to it, a peculiar series of procedural steps. Initially, she did not pay much attention to it. However, when Dora a news report detailing the brutal murder of a young man and the story displayed the plan of his house, she immediately recalled the drawings she had seen by her unfaithful husband with whom she was nearing divorce. She decided to inform the investigators. This information provided the police with sufficient grounds to search the house of the alleged perpetrator. They found the mysterious notebook that the businessman's wife had mentioned in his office. Although the pages containing the house's plan and additional records were missing, they were soon located in a trash can within the office. Gregory had apparently attempted, but forgotten to dispose of them properly. He had merely torn out the pages, crumpled them, and discarded them in the trash bin. Apparently, he was confident that no search would be conducted on his house as there was no incriminating evidence against him. On these pieces of paper, aside from the house's layout, there was an elaborate outline of the crime itself. It became evident that the perpetrator had meticulously planned every aspect over a prolonged period. The document mentioned specific actions like disabling his phone, wearing gloves, and applying a special substance to shoe soles to avoid leaving footprints on floors. From these records, it was clear that Gregory had tracked his victim. He knew Patrick's return schedule and was aware of surveillance cameras present inside and around Patrick's home. Additionally, Gregory ensured that he disposed of all incriminating items, such as weapons used in the crime and soiled clothes, shoes, and gloves. His downfall stemmed from his own records not being destroyed in time and his wife's curiosity. Furthermore, police discovered a fourth missing shell casing on Gregory's table inside a cigar box, evidently intended as some macabre trophy by Gregory. Forensics confirmed this casing matched those from the crime scene. The defense attorneys tried shifting blame towards Jessica during trial preparations. However, there was enough concrete evidence pointing towards Gregory for him to be arrested and brought forth for trial proceedings. The primary challenge then lay within considering all evidence collected deemed circumstantial, since neither murder weapon nor direct proof linked him physically at victim's residence. Along with no witnessing testimonies raised complexities. Ultimately, proceedings began against Bender. However, challenges remained in proving the case beyond a reasonable doubt. This was due to the circumstantial nature of the evidence. Crucial links were unbridgeable, making it difficult to reach absolute conclusiveness essential. Until May 2021, more than 3 years after he sought the best lawyers who had ample time to prepare for the case thoroughly. Despite this, the businessman remained optimistic, appearing to believe he would escape accountability. Jessica was a pivotal witness. She detailed her long-standing relationship with Gregory, describing how she discovered he was married and tried to end their involvement. She also shared instances of harassment and threats against her and Patrick. Jessica provided crucial evidence, including saved screenshots of correspondence and phone records. In response, Bender's attorneys attempted to shift all blame onto Jessica. The defense argued that Jessica herself provoked Gregory with her actions, registering on a dating site and starting a new relationship before ending things with Gregory. They claimed this behavior wounded his pride and ego. Furthermore, Jessica was accused of mercantilism, highlighting her fondness for receiving expensive gifts from a wealthy suitor. During one session, Dara Sanchez, the defendant's now ex-wife, was called as a witness. The previously indifferent defendant became animated and unexpectedly professed his love for her. Moved by this confession, Sanchez seemingly reconsidered her stance on testifying against Gregory. She got confused during her testimony, citing forgetfulness. Eventually, she mentioned that she had lived with the man for many years and doubted he was capable of murder. Defense attorneys tried to challenge the legality of the search of defendant's home. Despite his ex-wife's unexpected statement and the lack of direct evidence, the jury still found Gregory Bender guilty of first-degree murder after hours of deliberation. He was sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. When the judge read the sentence, Bender stared at Jessica intently, without blinking. His glare really made her feel sick, and she almost had a panic attack. Sitting next to her late fiancé's mother, Jessica began sobbing and choking. Despite many attempts by Bender and his well-paid lawyers to appeal and get the case reviewed, all appeals were rejected. The widespread attention this case received in society played no small part in this outcome, since a wealthy millionaire businessman had cold-bloodedly murdered a simple working man and tried to get away with it. The story of Patrick Dearer was widely covered in the press. As Gregory Bender remains behind bars, Jessica Devaney says she feels safe. She continues to live in Patrick's memory, wearing the ring he gave her as a gift and another piece of jewelry that he never got around to giving her. On January 3, 2023, 43-year-old Jennifer Brown disappeared in Limerick Township, Pennsylvania, leaving her 8-year-old son Noah alone at home. The next day, on January 4th, her close friend and business partner, 33-year-old Blair Watts, reported her missing when he could not get in touch with her. A large-scale search began as authorities, as well as her family and friends, scoured the town for any traces she could have left behind. What could have happened to Jennifer? Why would she abandon her son without any explanation? Limerick Township is a township in Montgomery County in the state of Pennsylvania in the United States. The township was named after the hometown of early settler William Evans, whose family arrived in the area from Limerick, Ireland in 1698. It can be found about 34 miles northwest of the city of Philadelphia, and today it has a population of just over 20,000 people. The town is drained by the Schuylkill River, which separates it from Chester County. One of its major industries is the Limerick Nuclear Power Plant, which provides employment to a number of people within the town. And it is here in Limerick Township that our story begins today. Jennifer Brown was born in 1979 in the United States of America. Growing up in the 80s, she had a happy and carefree childhood. Not much else is known about the early life of Jennifer Brown or where she came from. In 2014, she had her first and only child, a beautiful boy named Noah, who was the apple of her eye. His father was not in the picture, and she raised him on her own. She was a devoted mother who doted on her son, especially since he was diagnosed with autism at an early age and needed extra care and attention. In 2023, Jennifer was 43 years old and her son Noah was 8. They were living a happy life at 1408 Stratford Court in Limerick Township in Pennsylvania and needed nothing except each other. Their loved ones and neighbors saw the bond the two had and loved them for the kind and caring people they were. But tragedy was waiting just around the corner, and it arrived when they were least expecting it. On January 3, 2023, Jennifer Brown disappeared without any explanation to where she could have been. The last person to see her was her friend Blair Watts, who had been at her place from 1 p.m. to 2 p.m. that day and had agreed to pick up her son Noah from his bus stop after school to take him for a sleepover to his house with his own 3 children, something that they did quite often. The next day, on January 4th, Noah was dropped off at his bus stop by Blair and attended school like he always did. However, that day at school, Noah seemed distraught and was acting out in class in a manner that was quite unusual for him. Concerned about his behavior, his teachers tried to find out why he was acting like this, and they learned that he had missed the last 2 doses of his autism medication, something that never happened. Noah also told them that his mother had gone to the grocery store and never come back. This further worried his teachers, as they knew Jennifer was a very hands-on mom who loved her son and would never forget to give him his medication and would never leave him alone. They tried to get in touch with her throughout the day but could not do so, which made them sure that something had gone wrong, as Jennifer always responded when it came to any problems her son might be having in school. At the same time that day, Jennifer's friend Blair Watts had also been trying to get in touch with her, but had had no success. He went over to Noah's bus stop at 4 p.m. that day to see if Jennifer would be there to pick him up, but she did not show. He picked up Noah himself and had no option left but to report her missing to the police. At 4:20 p.m. that day, Officer Stephen Crawford of the Limerick Township Police Department went over to 1408 Stratford Court to conduct a welfare check on Jennifer's home after she was reported missing. He found that her car was parked outside her home, and after entering the residence he found her keys, purse, tablet, and work cell phone were all still inside the house. However, her personal cell phone was nowhere to be found, and when the police tried to track it down, they found that it had been switched off at 7 a.m. on January 4th and hadn't been traceable since. Its last known location was within 400 meters of Lewis Road and Ridge Pike in Limerick Township. Now sure that something bad had happened to Jennifer, she was confirmed as missing, and a thorough investigation was launched into her disappearance. Police began by interviewing her family and friends as well as her neighbors to find out if anyone had seen or heard anything around the time she disappeared, or if they knew of any personal reasons that may have caused Jennifer to leave. But no one had seen or heard anything at the time, and everyone they spoke to, including her Aunt Diane Bream, her friend Tiffany Barron, and her friend and business partner Blair Watts, said that there was no way Jennifer would leave on her own, as she would never abandon her son Noah, who she loved with all her heart. With no real leads to follow, they launched a search for her in the town and the surrounding areas, which was conducted by authorities, as well as her family and friends and other volunteers who joined in. Despite a large number of people working together and thoroughly searching the area for the next 2 weeks, they could not find any traces of her or clues as to where she might have been. Her loved ones put out statements to the public pleading for anyone with any information to come forward, but nothing was reported. It seemed like Jennifer had vanished without a trace and may never be found. But on January 18th, 2 weeks after she had been reported missing, 2 employees who worked at a warehouse near the city of Royersford, a neighboring municipality to Limerick Town, went out for a smoke break in a field behind the warehouse. While they were smoking, they noticed something strange. It was a hole that they had not seen before that appeared to have been freshly dug. When they went closer to examine it, they were horrified to find the body of a woman buried there in a shallow grave. They immediately notified the police, who arrived soon after, and on examining the body, police identified the woman as the person they had been searching for the past 2 weeks. None other than Jennifer Brown. When the body was taken for an autopsy, the examiners determined the cause of death to be homicide by unspecified means. They were able to determine Jennifer had died from asphyxiation, which means that she had been strangled or suffocated to death in some way. They also found that she had 3 broken ribs, indicating that she had likely struggled against her killer, who had beaten her to subdue her. Now, the nature of the investigation changed from a missing persons case to a homicide, and police once again began to interview and interrogate everyone close to her, including her family and friends. However, the interviews they conducted did not turn up any new information or leads for them to follow. Due to this, they could not even identify any possible suspects in the case. It seemed like the investigation was going to fizzle out with nothing for the police to follow. But then, when they were least expecting it, they got a lead from an unexpected source. When the news regarding Jennifer's murder was released to the public, the police asked that anyone having any information that might be useful to the investigation should come forward and disclose it. In response to this, one of Noah's teachers came forward and revealed to the police that on January 4th, the day that Jennifer had gone missing, Noah had told her some information that she thought was unimportant at the time, but she realized was suspicious after learning of Jennifer's death. She told them that Noah had told her that when Blair Watts had picked him up from his bus stop on January 3rd, he had stopped at Noah's home under the pretext of getting Noah's iPad from the house. But when he returned, Noah saw that along with his iPad, Blair also had Jennifer's personal phone with him. Noah was sure that this was his mother's phone, as the image on the lock screen was a picture of him in the 2nd grade, something he recognized immediately. This was a major breakthrough for the police, as they had previously believed that whoever had killed Jennifer had taken her cell phone and knew that if they could find the person with the phone, they would have a suspect. Blair what's now became the prime suspect in their eyes, and they decided to take a thorough look into his relationship with Jennifer to see if there was anything they had missed. When they did this, a number of details emerged that shocked the investigators looking into the matter. When the detectives began to look into the relationship between Jennifer and Blair, they discovered a number of suspicious details. On the personal side of their relationship, everything seemed to check out. The two did appear to be close friends who spent a lot of time together and knew each other's family and friends. But when they looked into their professional relationship as business partners, things were not as rosy as they seemed on the surface. Blair had owned a restaurant by the name of Birdie's Kitchen that ultimately went out of business and shut down in the early months of 2022. After this, he turned to Jennifer for help, and in August 2022, she agreed to help him by investing in his business so he could reopen Birdie's Kitchen at a new location. They signed a contract that said Jennifer would provide Blair with money every 6 weeks or so, which she would use to eventually get Birdie's Kitchen back in business. According to Blair, between August and January, Jennifer sent him around $36,000 to help him set up his business again. He also stated that according to their contract, she still owed him another $9,000 to fulfill her side of the deal. Blair had found a new location for the restaurant and was supposed to pay the property owners a sum of money and sign a lease so that he could open Birdie's Kitchen there in January of 2023. This money was given to him by Jennifer as an investment, but Blair never actually paid the property owners. He instead secretly blew the money on himself and his personal activities. On December 26, 2022, the property owners revoked the agreement they had with him as he failed to pay them the sum he owed them for the lease. This put Blair in a desperate situation. He now had no money and no location to open his restaurant. Police were sure in his desperation he had done something atrocious to try and save himself. They looked into the transaction history on Jennifer's iPad, which had been present in her home, and they found that on January 3rd, there were 2 cash transfers from her account to Birdie's Kitchen, which totaled an amount of $17,000, which was never a part of the written agreement between Jennifer and Blair. They also saw that the transfers had failed multiple times and were only successful when the 2-factor authentication system on the iPad was disabled. Police then interviewed the property owners who had revoked the agreement with Blair, and they learned that on January 4th, the very same day that Blair had reported Jennifer as missing, he had shown up at the property and told the owners he now had the money that he needed to put down a lease. Police were now sure that Blair had murdered his friend and business partner, but since they knew he would likely not confess to the crime, seeing the lengths he had gone to cover it up, they decided they needed more evidence against him. Next, they interviewed his wife, Tiara Taylor, and asked her about Blair's whereabouts on January 3rd, the day that they believed he murdered Jennifer. His wife told them that Blair had gone over to Jennifer's around 1 p.m. on that day and had then returned home at around 4:30 p.m. with Noah after picking him up at his stop. She then told them that he had only been at home for a short time before leaving again at around 5 p.m. and not returning home that night. When police looked into where Blair had gone after leaving home, they found out that he had spent the night with his mistress, a woman named Tatiana Garrett. But when they interviewed Tatiana, she told them that Blair only met her around 8 p.m., which meant that between 5 and 8 p.m., there was a window of time where his location was unaccounted for. The detectives now had enough information to construct a timeline of how they believed the murder had taken place. They believed that on January 3rd, Blair had gone over to Jennifer's while Noah was at school at around 1 p.m. and murdered her. He then made the cash transfer to his account from her iPad and left to pick up Noah from his bus stop around 4 p.m. He then returned to Jennifer's home, saying he wanted to get Noah's iPad but also stole Jennifer's mobile phone as well, the crucial piece of evidence that had led them to suspecting him. After this, he had returned home, dropped Noah off, and then left again at 5 p.m. to Jennifer's, where he collected her body and then drove it to the field near Royersford, where he buried her in a shallow grave. He had then gone to meet his mistress and spent the rest of the night with her, before returning home in the morning so he could drop off Noah at the bus stop. He had then gone to the property owners to tell them he now had the money for the lease and then returned around 4 p.m. to pretend to see if Jennifer would pick up Noah from the bus stop, so he could then report her missing to the police and make sure that they did not suspect him. He had meticulously planned everything out and may have gotten away with it if it wasn't for the mistake he made letting Noah see his mother's phone. It was Noah seeing the phone and telling his teacher about it that led the police right to Blair. The police now had enough evidence to charge him, but they did one final thing to be sure. They used a cadaver dog that was trained to smell out biological remains and identify them, to first sniff out Jennifer's home, where it identified that she had been killed in her kitchen from the smell that lingered there. They then took this dog to Blair's car and it identified the same smell as being present there as well. This was the final nail in the coffin for Blair, and it was the last piece of evidence the detectives needed. On February 8th, Blair was arrested and charged with first-degree murder, third-degree murder, and theft. He is currently being held at the Montgomery County Correctional Facility without the possibility of bail and is awaiting a preliminary hearing. Jennifer's friends and family, who were devastated when she was found dead, are happy that her killer has been identified and that they have some form of closure. However, they are still reeling in shock that it was someone they all knew and trusted and who was supposed to be a close friend to Jennifer. It's literally like we're living in a movie that we watch on TV. It's so surreal and unbelievable. Tiffany Barron, Jennifer's friend who is acting as a spokesperson for the family, said in a statement to the press, "Once the case goes to trial, if Blair is found guilty, he will likely spend the rest of his life in jail." And there we have it, folks. The tale of how a case was only solved because the 8-year-old son of the victim noticed a mistake the killer made and didn't forget about it. This case serves as an example that when you commit a horrible act like Blair did, you will always get found out in the end. But what did you think of the case? Do you think Blair would have gotten away with it if Noah hadn't noticed his mother's phone? Or do you think it was only a matter of time till the police found out about the transactions he made and began to suspect him? Case of Paula Ortega. In early 2023, the city of Sangolquí in Ecuador's Pichincha region was rocked by a tragic incident. It wasn't just the brutality of the crime that shocked the community, but its motive, a mere $600 theft. Could the life of 37-year-old Paula Ortega Alcocer really be valued at just $600? Born in March 1986, Paula was the second child in a large family. She excelled at Dario Figueroa Lara School and later attended the Polytechnic University, where she developed a keen interest in the hospitality industry. After her studies, actively contributed to the growth of her family's business, which specialized in party goods manufacturing. The Ortega Alcocer family was well-to-do and renowned in Sangolquí and neighboring Ecuadorian towns. Paula's father, in his youth, began building a business supplying party goods across Ecuador. The venture became quite successful, enabling him to start his own production of balloons, piñatas, and other festive paraphernalia. This expansion led to the opening of several stores. The Alcocer family's party shops were located not only in Sangolquí, but also in Ecuador's capital, Quito. Each family member played a role in the development and maintenance of their enterprise. The father expanded the main production line, opening new workshops for balloons, garlands, caps, and various party items. Each of the 3 children managed a store, tailoring it to their vision. Paula's entrepreneurial spirit led her beyond just managing a store. She organized a party planning service within the company, which turned out to be a great success. It seemed Paula had found her calling, bringing joy to people, which made her truly happy. While the business ventures of the Ortega family flourished for a long time, unfortunately, Paula Ortega's personal life was not as successful. Despite her youthful and joyous demeanor, she faced significant hardships in her private life. Paula's first marriage to Carlos Pedro turned out to be unhappy. After the birth of their daughter, Carlos developed an alcohol addiction. He began disappearing from home and stealing money from Paula's store. His infidelity was the last straw, leading Paula to end the marriage and find herself alone with her daughter. This period was particularly challenging for Paula, as she lost hope in finding personal happiness. However, The psychological support of her family and her passion for her work helped her regain a sense of normalcy in her life. A decade later, met Christian Diego. A tall, dark-haired, and handsome man, Christian was 4 years younger than Paula. Having lost faith in finding a worthy partner, Paula was cautious with the persistent young suitor. Christian proved to be calm and reliable, quickly bonding with Paula's daughter, which greatly impressed Paula. After 2 years of relationship, her heart warmed to him, leading to a beautiful wedding ceremony. Christian embraced Paula's daughter as his own, and they soon welcomed another daughter, Maria. Christian and Paula spent 5 years together, with Christian fully integrating into Paula's father's company. He was entrusted with finding locations for new stores, which often kept him away from home. Coming from a modest working-class family, Christian had always dreamed of owning a large business. Unfortunately, some people can conceal their dark sides so well that one might live for years alongside ruthless criminals without suspecting a thing. However, the truth eventually comes to light when evil erupts in the most unexpected ways. Paula Ortega and her husband, Christian, appeared to be the epitome of a happy, successful couple to their family, friends, and neighbors. However, this perception was only surface deep. In 2000, Paula's father passed away after a long illness. His death not only devastated the family, but also turned their business upside down. Christian, driven by a desire for power and the wealth it brought, eagerly sought to take Paula's father's place in the business. However, his lack of skill led to one failed deal after another. As a result, Christian began to vent his frustration on his family. Initially in secret, but later openly, he began to abandon his family, indulging in a life of debauchery. Women and alcohol became his escape into a world of pleasure and recklessness. With Paula's father no longer there to restrain him, Christian's true nature began to surface. Having already experienced a traumatic marriage, Paula refused to endure this behavior again. The couple's home became a battleground of endless scandals, revealing Christian's true nature as an ambitious egotist, craving only power and unquestioned obedience. After a particularly nasty argument, Paula secretly filed for divorce, fearing her husband's reaction. The news of this drastically changed Christian's behavior. Unwilling to lose his place in the successful family, he stopped his outrageous conduct and appeared to transform for the better. He expressed remorse, claiming to be caught up in a whirlwind of confusion, and professed his love and value for his family. His eloquence persuaded Paula. Not wanting to be alone again, she gave him a second chance. In a gesture of reconciliation, Christian suggested organizing a romantic dinner at their home. Paula agreed. She sent their daughters to her parents' house and began preparing for the evening. Inside, she was aflutter with excitement. Deep down, she still dreamed of a happy, strong family and was doing everything she could to preserve it. The evening at the Ortega home was one of celebration and comfort. The living room was lit up with festive garlands, and the dining table was warmly illuminated by the yellow glow of candles. Christian uncorked a bottle of dry white wine while Paula served a hot meal. The night could have been genuinely reconciliatory had it not been for a sudden proposal from Christian that disrupted the peace. Christian, a co-owner of the Alcozer company, revealed to his wife a significant misstep. In his pursuit to replace Paula's father and gain full control, he had made a costly mistake in an important tender, leading to substantial losses for the company. Now, the firm desperately needed a new investor, implying that a part of the company would officially change hands. Paula was adamantly against this, believing her father's business should remain a family affair. Despite Christian's persuasion, she stood her ground, infuriating him. He had already found an investor and was eager to complete the deal without complications. Their dinner, and by extension their relationship, soured. January 2nd, 2023 seemed like any other day. Paula took her younger daughter to the playroom before heading to her shop for work. She had a large order to prepare involving assembling balloon fountains and party decorations for a themed event. During her lunch break, 2 men knocked on the shop's door. Although closed, Paula opened it, expecting a courier to pick up the balloon bouquets. The men, slim and dressed identically as if they were twins, startled her with their dark hoodies. They lingered, scanning the shop before splitting up. As Paula called out to them, stating the shop was closed for lunch, they cornered her against the wall. The tension of this silent scene was broken by a knock on the glass door. The men hastily exited the shop. A smiling young courier arrived, unwittingly rescuing Paula from the unknown assailants. Shaken, Paula handed over the package, closed the shop, and with trembling hands, called her mother. She was visibly frightened, a sentiment she expressed over the phone. Paula's mother suggested reporting the unsettling incident at her shop to the police, but Paula declined, attributing her reaction to mere fright since nothing harmful had actually occurred. She didn't reopen her shop that day, her thoughts consumed by Christian's actions and the identity and motives of the two mysterious men. Seeking solace, Paula decided to take a stroll through the city. She stopped at a nearby cafe for some coffee, walked through the park to breathe in the fresh air, and then visited her sister. Over cups of fragrant tea, they engaged in a heart-to-heart conversation. Overwhelmed by the day's shocking events, Paula confided in her sister not only about the scary encounter at her shop, but also about the difficulties in her marriage. She shared how Christian had drastically changed after her father's passing, indulging in alcohol and openly being unfaithful. Paula chose not to mention his proposal about merging the company with a new investor, as she habitually kept her personal struggles to herself. But that day, her emotions overpowered her pride and shame over tolerating such demeaning treatment. "He's a peculiar being. My sister was lively, happy, cheerful, enterprising, hardworking, an extremely gentle and kind mother. She should have been receiving energy from him," Adriana Ortega, Paula's sister, would later say. Paula spoke of her long-term life plans, her desire for her daughters to grow up and become professionals, and her intention to continue her business. She was selfless and tirelessly hardworking, Adriana recalled. After her emotional talk with her sister, Paula headed home. A phone call from Christian interrupted her. He was picking up their daughter from the playroom and would come to the shop to pick her up as well. His hurried speech was interspersed with children's voices. Paula didn't get a chance to tell him about the frightening incident at her shop, especially since she suspected him to be involved. Reluctantly, Paula returned to work, once again prioritizing her family's well-being over her own. She didn't have to wait long. Christian arrived alone, explaining that their daughter had wanted to go home, and he couldn't deny his little princess. He informed Paula that the girls were at home and eagerly waiting for hamburgers for dinner. In what has become a modern family tradition, Christian took Paula not to the nearest fast food joint, but to a restaurant courtyard at a shopping center, several blocks from their home. Parking the car beside a secluded wall and locking it securely, he left Paula inside to collect their order. Relaxing in the passenger seat after a taxing day, Paula closed her eyes, unaware of the impending danger. Shortly, she recognized two familiar figures near the car, talking loudly and circling the vehicle. Recognizing them as the unexpected visitors from her shop, Paula tried to stay calm, trusting that the car was secure and Christian would return soon. Suddenly, the car's lights flashed and the door locks disengaged. In a panic, Paula scrambled to the back seat, hiding between the seats and covering her head with her arms. But she was trapped with no escape. One intruder casually got into the driver's seat, while the other joined him in the back, pinning Paula down even more. She felt something warm trickling down her arm before darkness enveloped her. Paula sustained 11 knife wounds to her neck and 2 to her face. After the brutal attack, the assailants fled the scene, leaving Paula alone and gravely injured. Christian returned just 7 minutes later to a horrific sight. The car's interior was drenched in blood. Frantically, he called emergency services, but struggled to clearly communicate the situation and give emergency coordinates. He then called Paula's mother to report the attack before driving to the hospital himself. Tragically, Paula succumbed to her injuries in the emergency room, passing away before receiving necessary medical attention. Christian, overwhelmed by grief and shock at the loss of his wife, reacted with loud cries and throwing chairs in the waiting room. The sudden violent end of Paula Ortega left a community in shock and a family in profound grief, raising questions about the motive and identity of the attackers. The initial theory of the prosecution was a violent end inflicted during a robbery. It was later discovered that $600 and a gold necklace were missing from Paula's purse. This began an investigation. The prosecution's theory was confirmed when footage from city cameras showed two unknown men who had visited Paula's store earlier that day in the vicinity. Both were in hoodies, making it impossible to create a clear image of their faces, and their vague descriptions provided no clarity. 2 months after the tragic event, Paula's family demanded justice, but the investigation was at a standstill. A turning point came when Adriana Ortega, Paula's sister, gave testimony casting doubt on Christian's innocence. She informed the investigators about a conversation she had with Paula on the day of the incident. Adriana also mentioned that Christian regularly committed infidelity and domestic violence against Paula, who was contemplating divorce. This provided a perfect motive as Christian, driven by ambition, could not afford to lose his wealth and status in the event of a divorce. The prosecution investigated this angle. During a search of their home, incriminating messages were found on Christian's phone, indicating multiple affairs and turbulent marital relations. A critical piece of evidence was documentation prepared for the transfer of the company to a private individual, which Paula had refused to sign. Following these revelations, the incident was investigated as a suspected homicide. As the prosecution continued to gather information implicating Christian Diego, new evidence emerged, unraveling the complex web of the couple's relationship. 2 weeks after the incident, we found out he transferred $2,000 to an unknown woman's account, said Adriana, Paula's sister, adding another layer of suspicion to the already convoluted case. The most shocking aspect, as claimed by relatives, was that Christian made a payment using Paula's account while she was dying from her injuries. Instead of immediately helping his gravely wounded wife, Christian seemingly bided his time. Investigations confirmed this information. The identity of the woman who received the transfer from Christian that day was established as 28-year-old Laura Castillo. Urgently summoned for questioning, she revealed that she had noticed her bank card missing a couple of days earlier, but didn't think much of it, as her brother often used her card. The electronic payment records showed a transfer of $2,000 from Christian on January 2nd at 2005. However, Laura denied any acquaintance with Christian. Her solid alibi at the time of the incident absolved her of any involvement. She was released and the investigation hit a dead end again. Days later, Laura returned to the police, stating her brother had returned the bank card as she had suspected. She provided a full description of her brother's appearance, which matched one of the criminals caught on surveillance cameras near the car. In the chaos of fleeing the crime scene, one attacker forgot to pull up his hood. The identities of Byron and Mortens Castillo, two repeat offenders with a substantial criminal history, were established. The brothers were apprehended. But what could possibly link two seasoned criminals to a seemingly respectable and successful family man? Further investigation revealed that the attacks on Paula had been carried out repeatedly by the Castillo brothers. But why were these repeat offenders targeting this young woman? On December 8, 2022, Paula Ortega faced a harrowing incident at a gas station when her car was stolen. Distracted by a young man, his accomplice quickly jumped behind the wheel and sped off. Fortunately, her daughters weren't in the car that day. Surveillance footage identified the two familiar culprits. Coincidentally, on the day of the theft, Paula unknowingly came face to face with her future assailant. However, the car theft case took an unexpected turn when Christian intervened. Claiming the thieves had contacted him, he met with them and retrieved all of Paula's personal belongings, including her wallet. This development cast further doubt on Christian's innocence. Seasoned investigators were puzzled by the widower's boldness in shielding the criminals. Surveillance cameras played a crucial role in identifying the carjackers. As Christian realized he was under suspicion, he concocted a new defense narrative involving extortion by two criminal brothers demanding a large sum of money. But before he could deploy his version of events, the police executed a swift interrogation strategy. Separating the suspects and suggesting one had confessed, they obtained a confession from Martin Castillo. He admitted that more than 2 months earlier, Christian had paid them $2,000 to murder his wife, promising another $2,000 after the deed. During a reenactment, Martin demonstrated how he inflicted 11 fatal knife wounds on the terrified woman. Realizing the crime was uncovered, he remorselessly divulged all details of their arrangement with Christian. Martin revealed that the car theft and the attack on Paula's shop were also parts of Christian's plan to pressure her. By chance, Paula lived a few hours longer than intended. On November 29, 2023, all three suspects appeared in court. The prosecution presented a comprehensive picture of the murder day, pieced together from various sources. Videos from surveillance cameras in the area where Christian parked the car, subjected to audio and video forensic analysis, unveiled a chilling, soul-freezing narrative. In chilling surveillance footage, Christian Diego is seen exiting his car and heading towards a shopping center elevator. Moments later, he remotely unlocks his car from half a block away, allowing two assailants to enter the vehicle and attack Paula. The prosecutor's report noted Christian's odd behavior post-attack, repeatedly looking back, approaching the car, pausing, returning, pacing back and forth, and making phone calls. Surprisingly, upon finding his wife bleeding profusely, he showed no shock or urgency to help her, instead driving her to a distant hospital. Christian's actions, meticulously reconstructed from surveillance videos, particularly in the first 4 minutes after Paula's attack, were cold and calculating. As she bled in the car but was still alive, Christian, standing nearby, callously transferred money to his accomplices for the assault. Paula's family lawyers urged the court to consider these videos as aggravating factors in the crime. The reconstructed sequence of events presented in court proves the crime was premeditated. Hours before the attack, around 1:30 p.m., two individuals entered Paula's store, dropped off nearby by Christian. This implies the crime was intended to occur earlier, during the lunchtime closure, when Paula was alone. Prosecutor Marlon Calder and highlighted inconsistencies. How did the assailants know the couple would be at the eatery if they weren't tailing them? Yet they arrived on time to commit the crime. Christian's actions, not fully raising the car window, unlocking the doors near the eatery, his 1,000 times pacing before aiding his wife, phone calls, and not seeking immediate medical attention at a nearby clinic are key evidence for charging him with orchestrating the femicide. Femicide, defined as the intentional murder of a woman simply because she is a woman, was a central theme in the trial of Christian and Paula Ortega's troubled relationship. Shockingly present in today's society, this hate crime was exemplified through Christian's younger age, which seemed to fuel his contempt and abuse towards Paula. Despite her success, Paula lived in a metaphorical golden cage, masking and enabling her husband's tyrannical behavior, allowing him to assert dominance. Years of silence culminated in Christian's sinister plot to seize control of Paula's thriving party empire and gain sole guardianship of their daughter, Maria. Testimonies from over 10 witnesses, including neighbors, friends, and acquaintances, alongside thorough examination of internal and external family communications, revealed Christian's true motives and objectives. Without legal signing rights, he sought to coerce Paula into transferring her company shares. However, his plan failed. Christian didn't physically harm Paula, but inflicted severe psychological abuse, artfully concealed under the guise of a perfect family life. According to the Prosecutor General's report, video evidence led to Christian's preventive isolation as the crime's orchestrator. This measure isn't an arrest, a strategy to neutralize a societal threat. Following this action, Christian planned to flee. In the high-profile case against Christian Diego, accused of orchestrating his wife's demise, his defense team worked tirelessly to portray him as a victim. However, they were unable to refute crucial evidence like surveillance footage and falsified company transfer documents. Desperate, the defense then attempted to depict the accused as suffering from a mental disorder, citing episodes of sudden rage. Multiple psychiatrists evaluated Christian, but he was declared competent. His defense counsel, realizing the gravity of the situation, advised Christian to flee the country, asking if his passport was ready and suggesting he buy a ticket to Panama for the next day. However, this plan to escape justice failed. Christian's search for Central American flight tickets raised alarm bells with the authorities. The prosecutor swiftly ordered an 8-hour detainment of Christian Diego, followed by charges and the disclosure of case details to a judge specializing in domestic violence cases. Pending trial, the suspect was held in preliminary detention, pursued as the alleged mastermind behind a heinous act that left 2 young children motherless and an entire family grieving an irreplaceable loss. The Ortega family demands justice for this atrocious crime, emphasizing the devastating impact on the children and their irreplaceable loss. In a case that gripped public attention, the jury concluded that Christian and his 2 accomplices were guilty of a meticulously planned intentional act of extreme brutality. The unremorseful Christian and his associates were sentenced to 26 years in prison. The municipal authorities of Rumiñahui expressed their solidarity with the tragic loss of Paula Alcosar. The institution extends its deepest sympathies to the family and friends affected by this incident. The unfortunate demise of this esteemed businesswoman, friend, mother, and wife, who contributed significantly to the Camptons' development and brought prosperity to those in her circle, is deeply mourned. Their statement read, "Paula's case emerged as a prominent instance of violence against women following the Latin American Association for Alternative Development's report of 332 fatalities due to gender-based violence in 2022. The night of July 23, 2010 was dark and gloomy in the quiet town of Independence, Louisiana, when tragedy struck. 22-year-old Jameen Robinson was discovered lying unconscious on the side of the road. Despite the frantic efforts of medical personnel, he passed away 2 days later. For years, detectives were left with no leads or suspects, leaving the community in a state of fear and uncertainty. But just when all hope seemed lost, a mysterious witness suddenly came forward with information that changed everything. What did this witness know, and how did it change the course of the investigation? Hi, and welcome back to Mysterious Hook, friends. Today, we are looking at a 13-year-old case that was solved in 2023. Independence, a small town in Tangipahoa Parish, Louisiana, is located about an hour north of New Orleans and is home to a variety of historic landmarks. With a population of just over 1,600 people, it is a tight-knit community that values its rich history and southern hospitality. The town is known for its annual Sicilian Festival, which celebrates the Sicilian heritage of many of its residents. It is also a popular destination for tourists looking to experience Louisiana's unique culture and history. It is here in this small and quiet town where our story begins. Jameen was born on March 31, 1989 in Independence, Louisiana. Although there is very little known about his early life and details such as the names of his parents or the schools he attended remain a mystery, one thing that is known for certain about Jameen's childhood is that he had a sister named Chastity Jackson. Despite the lack of information about their early years, it was clear that the 2 of them shared a special bond that could not be broken. Growing up in Independence, Louisiana, the siblings relied on each other for comfort, support, and love, and as they grew older, their relationship only grew stronger. People who knew Jameen describe him as a sweet young man who was always beaming with joy and spreading kindness wherever he went. Everyone who crossed his path was struck by his infectious smile and warm heart. His gentle personality and quiet disposition made him a beloved figure among his family and friends. He also had a deep love for his family, whom he held close to his heart. But there was more to Jameen than just his kind-hearted nature. He was a gifted artist who had a talent for drawing. His sketches were a reflection of his boundless imagination and his ability to capture the essence of the world around him. Jameen was also a devoted member of his church community, regularly volunteering his time and resources to help those in need. Apart from this, Jameen also had a close friend by the name of Monterey Page. Monterey lived in the same neighborhood and attended the same school as Jameen. He was also well known by Jameen's family. Despite Jameen being 4 years older, the 2 got along quite well. There was no doubt that Jameen's days were filled with laughter, love, and endless possibilities. He had his whole life ahead of him, with plans and dreams that seemed like they would soon be within reach. But when they least expected it, things took a turn for the worse. July 23, 2010 started out like any other day for Jameen. He got out of bed and started his morning routine. completely oblivious to the fate that awaited him. As he went about his usual business, running errands and taking care of responsibilities, little did he know that he was completing a sequence of events that would ultimately lead to his untimely death. Perhaps if he had known what was going to happen, he would have chosen to remain indoors throughout the day rather than venture outside. Some minutes before 11 p.m. on that fateful day, an emergency call came to the Independence Police Department. The caller, who seemed to be in a state of panic, reported that someone was lying unconscious on Kem Street near a roadside ditch. It was unclear how long the person had been lying there, but the caller urged the police to hurry. The police officers on duty immediately sprang into action and rushed to the scene as fast as they could. When the police arrived at the scene, they were greeted with a chilling sight. A young man, barely clinging to life, lay motionless near a roadside ditch. Despite the absence of any visible physical injury or blood on his body, it was clear that he was in a terrible state. The officers' minds raced as they tried to figure out what could have happened to him. They began to suspect that the young man had been a victim of a hit-and-run driver, as there were no other signs of foul play in the area. Officers knew that time was of the essence and they had to act quickly to save his life. With the help of paramedics, they carefully loaded the young man into a waiting ambulance, hoping that he would make it to the hospital in time. With sirens blaring, they rushed to the Lally-Kemp Regional Medical Center. Upon arrival at the hospital, the doctors quickly stabilized the young man and assessed his condition. The news was not good. He had suffered from multiple head injuries and his life hung by a thread. Knowing the gravity of the young man's injuries, the doctors transferred him to St. Tammany Medical Center, one of the best hospitals in the state. As the doctors and nurses worked tirelessly to keep the young man alive, more information about him began to surface. Shockingly, it turned out to be none other than Jamin. His family were soon contacted and they rushed to his side at the hospital. With hearts heavy with fear and anguish, they prayed and hoped for a miracle. But as the hours ticked by, their worst fears were confirmed. Jamin's condition was critical, and the doctors soon prepared him for surgery. The surgery was successful, but Jamin's recovery was slow and uncertain. The medical team decided to transfer him to the New Orleans University Hospital, where he could receive the best possible care. Despite the doctors' best efforts, Jamin's condition continued to deteriorate and his family's hope began to fade. They clung to every shred of optimism, but deep down they knew that they were facing the unthinkable. On July 25, 2010, just 2 days after his fight began, Jamin passed away. His family was devastated. They couldn't believe that he had been taken away from them so suddenly, and in such a tragic way. The following day, after Jamin's death, the Tangipahoa Parish Coroner's Office scheduled an autopsy to determine the cause of his fatal injuries. The examiner's findings revealed that Jamin's death resulted from internal closed head injuries. The injuries also suggested that the vehicle that possibly hit him was slow-moving, which only added to the mystery of what happened that fateful night. As the news of Jamin's tragic death spread, a cloud of sadness and confusion descended upon the quiet town of Independence. Detectives of the Independence Police Department wasted no time in launching a full-scale investigation into the incident. They were determined to unravel the mystery behind Jamin's untimely demise. They began to meticulously piece together all the events of that fateful night, hoping to find the answers. The detectives faced a daunting task and they were not sure where to start. Who was the reckless driver that had possibly struck Jamin and left him for dead on the side of the road? And if it wasn't a hit-and-run incident, what exactly had happened to Jamin on that night? These and many more questions plagued the detectives. As the investigation into Jamin's death continued, detectives made a crucial discovery. The person who found Jamin lying on the roadside was none other than his friend and neighbor, Monter. With this revelation, the police immediately turned to Monter for answers, hoping that his account of events could provide valuable insight into what really happened on that night. However, even after several rounds of questioning, the police were still no closer to solving the case. The mystery surrounding Jamin's death only deepened, leaving detectives more frustrated. Jamin was soon laid to rest. The funeral was attended by many who had known him and loved him. After the funeral, the investigation into Jamin's death continued with renewed vigor. Detectives interviewed numerous individuals, but nothing came of it. The authorities even asked the public for help, urging anyone with information to come forward. The passing of time did not ease the pain felt by Jameen's loved ones. Each anniversary of his death brought renewed heartache, and the desire for justice remained strong. Despite the trail going cold, the authorities never gave up hope of solving the case. Unfortunately, the investigation yielded no concrete leads, and the case eventually went cold. Around 2017, the case was reopened. However, the Independence Police Department once again found themselves at a dead end regarding Jameen's case. With limited resources and no leads, they knew they needed to help find a breakthrough. Desperate, they turned to the Tangipahoa Parish Sheriff's Office for assistance. The Sheriff's Office then stepped in, bringing their expertise to the table in a bid to unravel the mystery behind Jameen's tragic death. Around this time, Detective Mike Sticker took charge of the case and began working tirelessly alongside Independence Police Chief Frank Edwards. The two men and several other detectives spent countless hours poring over the facts, determined to find any new leads that could potentially bring justice for Jameen. They believed that the community held the key to solving the case, and so they once again turned to the public for help. Police Chief Frank, in particular, remained hopeful that media coverage of the case would jog someone's memory or conscience and encourage them to come forward. 6 long years later, in January 2023, the breakthrough in Jameen's case finally came when a mysterious witness whose identity was kept confidential stepped forward. The witness had been carrying a heavy burden of guilt and finally felt compelled to come clean. His story was nothing short of jaw-dropping, and took the investigation in a completely different direction. According to the witness, Jameen's death had not been caused by a hit-and-run driver as previously thought, but by someone close to him. The individual told police that the person responsible for Jameen's death was his friend Montre. While the exact details of the witness account are still undisclosed by detectives, the gravity of Montre's actions were finally revealed. Following this, detectives began to look for him. His whereabouts were finally traced to Chambers County, Texas, and on February 10, 2023, officers finally arrested him. Even though he had been 17 when Jameen died, authorities decided to charge him as an adult. Up until 3 years ago, once you reached the age of 17, you were considered an adult offender in the state of Louisiana, said Tangipahoa Parish Sheriff Jimmy Travis. Monter was charged with second-degree murder, multiple failure to appear counts, and 1 charge of jumping bail. As it turns out, Monter's legal troubles seemed to have started long before he became a suspect in Jameen's murder. He had been previously arrested and had pleaded guilty to multiple drug charges. This was back on November 16, 2021. At the time, the court had ordered him to wear an ankle monitor and return for sentencing 3 days later on November 19th. However, instead of complying with the court order, Montre decided to flee to Chambers County, Texas, and also removed his ankle monitor illegally in the process. News of Montre's arrest for the murder sent shockwaves through the community, especially to Jameen's grieving family. At first, they could hardly believe it when they heard that their son's own friend was responsible for his tragic death. But as the reality set in, a sense of relief washed over them. The rest of the community also struggled to come to terms with the truth behind the case. It was a betrayal that cut deep, and people wondered how something so senseless could happen between two friends. Many were left with lingering questions and a sense of unease. But above all, there was a collective hope that this would bring closure for everyone involved. On February 27, 2023, Montre pleaded guilty to several charges in the drug-related case and was sentenced to 90 years in prison. At the moment, he is also awaiting trial for the murder of Jameen. After a long investigation, the truth behind Jameen's death finally came to light. Thanks to the perseverance of law enforcement and the bravery of a witness who came forward, justice was served. While nothing can bring back Jameen, his family and the community can finally have closure and begin to heal. But what do you think would have happened if the witness had not come forward with the information that Jameen was murdered by his friend Montre instead of being a victim of a hit and run? This is a story of survival that is hard to put into words. The bravery of 8-year-old Jennifer Schutt is beyond measure, and her actions in critical circumstances are remarkable. It's a rare case where the victim aided in apprehending her attacker. Despite losing her ability to speak due to a horrific injury, Jennifer survived, retaining every detail. Over 19 years, she relentlessly continued to pursue her own case. And in the end, she got her way. Jennifer Chouette, an 8-year-old schoolgirl, had recently finished school. She lived with her single mother, Elaine, who did everything possible to ensure her daughter's happiness and well-being. Elaine worked multiple jobs to support the family and provide Jennifer with a joyful childhood. Surrounded by such love and care, Jennifer blossomed into a lively and cheerful child, embracing learning with enthusiasm and displaying a keen intellect and curiosity. At such a young age, children are often afraid of the dark, and Jennifer was no exception. She had a fear of the dark and frequently slept alongside her mother in the same room. As far as I can remember back in my childhood, just didn't like the dark or sleeping alone. So I found comfort in going to bed. With my mom, we would all bed. We had with each other. That night, on August 9th, 2009, the mother and daughter slept in the same room. Jennifer was tossing and turning, kicking her mom in sleep, making it difficult for her to fall asleep. Unusually, at 2:30 a.m., Elaine woke up and asked Jennifer to go back to her own room for the rest of the night because she needed to get up early for work. Understandingly, Jennifer responded to her mother saying, "Just because I love you, Mom, I'm going to sleep in my own room tonight," and went to her room. Elaine would later regret this decision for a long time. But at that moment, she couldn't know what would happen next. The following morning, Elaine discovered that Jennifer was missing when she went to wake her up. She noticed that the window facing the parking lot was wide open. Elaine promptly called 911. Upon the police's arrival, she recounted that she hadn't heard any noise or screams after Jennifer went to her room. It is worth mentioning that their apartment was on the first floor, and the windows in Jennifer's room overlooked the parking lot, leading Elaine to fear that someone might have seen Jennifer and entered the room through the window. Elaine realized that their apartment was not the ideal living situation for her and her young daughter, but it was the best they could afford at the time. Nevertheless, Elaine's parents decided to help her and their granddaughter with a new place to live. They purchased a small house nearby and renovated it. Jennifer and her mother were supposed to move there in a few months, and they had been there the day before Jennifer went missing. They were working in the garden, where Jennifer was bitten by mosquitoes, which prevented her from sleeping peacefully that night. After her daughter's disappearance, Elaine was devastated. She said that Jennifer was all she had and pleaded for her return. The police worked tirelessly to locate her. Luckily, Elaine didn't have to wait long for news. Around 6:30 p.m. that same day, the police received a call from parents whose children were playing in a field and accidentally stumbled upon something. To their horror, they realized it was the body of a young girl. Upon arriving at the scene, the police found the body of 8-year-old Jennifer Chouette lying in the middle of the field, 5 kilometers from her home. Jennifer's condition was grave, but she was still breathing. Jennifer's condition was grave. Her throat had been cut from ear to ear. The main life-threatening injury for Jennifer was a wide wound on her throat, which caused her to lose a lot of blood and made her extremely pale and weak. Jennifer was taken to the hospital in critical condition, where doctors fought to save her life. I first saw Jennifer in the emergency room. She was a fairly small 8-year-old, very pale, covered with ant bites and scratches on her back. She couldn't make any sounds because of the injury that she had to her neck. Fortunately, after the operation, Jennifer's condition stabilized and the bleeding stopped. We completed her surgery. Her airway is stable. She's not bleeding, so we're very hopeful about her survival. When she regained consciousness after the surgery, her behavior underwent a sudden change. It turned out that she was afraid of all men. I was kind of a hard patient to deal with because I had a lot of nail doctors and I was scared of my ulcers. Additionally, the Dickinson Police Department deployed a whole team to guard her hospital room. Throughout this time, Jennifer was in a constant state of panic. She even hit a doctor in the stomach when he tried to approach her. Elaine tried to reassure her daughter, explaining that all these people were there to care for her and help her. However, Jennifer didn't trust anyone. Her behavior became more understandable when she finally revealed what had happened to her that night. We knew that we had a survivor that couldn't speak. The challenges were to extract information from her. Now we're talking about an 8-year-old. It was difficult. Jennifer could not directly inform the investigator of anything. To obtain any information, the detectives gave her a notebook and several pens, asking her to answer questions in writing. Due to her fear of men, Jennifer wrote notes to her mother, who then passed them to the officer. Jennifer's responses were surprisingly precise, detailing the events accurately. Despite being only 8 years old, she displayed remarkable intelligence for her age. She started by going into her room, turning on the light, and picking up a book to read, hoping it would help her sleep, which it did. Jennifer fell asleep. The next thing she knew, a stranger was carrying her out of the house. A wave, running with me, hearing me down the sidewalk, and I immediately tried to scream that he covered my nose and mouth. Afterward, he placed Jennifer in the car, claiming to be an undercover police officer. She later confessed that she immediately felt that something was wrong. Looking around, she saw her mother's car in the parking lot, so she was confused about where they were going and why. On the one hand, she knew that the police were good guys, but on the other hand, her mother had taught her not to trust strangers. If a child, I wanted to believe him, the product need that had just seemed about strangers in school. That was Skater in the dark. Knew that there is something really wrong here. As they passed her grandparents' house, Jennifer told the stranger that he could drop her off at their house, to which he replied, "I can't because they're not home." And then she realized he was lying because their car was in the driveway. Later, the man stopped near Jennifer's school about 3 kilometers from her home. He then said to watch the moon carefully. When it changed color, her mother would come for her. I remember anxiously waiting for the headlights that they never am. Think that at that point he is trying to psych himself up for what he really can't do to Neil. 5 minutes passed, and the stranger said, "Well, your mom's not coming, so we need to go further." They drove a few more blocks to a dead-end street where the strangers stopped the car. Jennifer tried once again to make sure he was a real policeman. I was in an interrogating hand, was wanting to print to me that he was a police officer. I wanted to know, where's your gun? Where's your badge? He told me he went back to the house, done with it and the bat feet. Jennifer turned around to search for it, and at that moment, the suspicious policeman took off her underwear. Jennifer is unsure of how long she was in the stranger's grip because she blacked out. She first regained consciousness when he was dragging her through the field by her ankles. Despite the excruciating pain from twigs and stones digging into her back, Jennifer pretended to be dead and stayed silent. He let go of her feet and left her in the field. Jennifer only heard him walking away. Then she heard his car door slam and him drive away. I realized I couldn't scheme, and I couldn't figure out why. I had just enough strength to throw my right hand on top of my neck. And that's when I thought if gaping went. And I looked at my hand, and I was full of glad. Since the exact time of Jennifer's disappearance is unknown, it is believed that she lay in the field for 12 to 14 hours. When the sun set, she saw the lights of passing cars. Nearby, she heard children's voices, and a dog approached her several times, as if trying to get the attention of its owner. But he never came. Throughout, she was bitten by fire ants, which helped her stay conscious. Anytime I lay in the field, I would be in disbelief that hadn't died yet. Jennifer said she wasn't afraid and had even accepted that she might not survive. But suddenly she heard children's voices nearby, and at that moment, something hit her leg. The next time Jennifer regained consciousness, she heard a police officer repeating, "You've been found. You're going to be okay. Just please stay with me. Please stay with me." And I remember being put into the life flight helicopter. This story was very challenging for young Jennifer, as she couldn't speak and had to write everything down on paper. Moreover, her fear of men complicated the situation. So her mother asked all the questions, and Jennifer's answers were relayed to the officers who were behind the door. Incredibly, 8-year-old Jennifer even managed to get the stranger's name from him. I just remember remembering his name, and so I wrote he fed his name with Dennis. I remember then that he looked griffy and like he may have had a scar or something on his face. For days after her disappearance, The police requested the services of forensic artist Lois Gibson, who communicated with Jennifer solely through gestures and notes. Despite these challenges, they managed to create an incredibly detailed composite sketch. It was shown to the public in hopes that someone would identify the man. Meanwhile, the police continued to comb through the crime scene and found Jennifer's clothing about half a mile away, along with a man's shirt and underwear. Although there was hope that DNA on the clothing would lead to the perpetrator, no matches were found. Jennifer's recovery was gradual. She showed remarkable resilience despite still being a child. There was a moment when she got upset over a chocolate bar she couldn't eat, screamed in frustration, and a faint sound escaped her mouth. I like to say how this happened. Soon after, Jennifer was discharged from the hospital. She not only returned home, but also went back to school. After completing her schooling and college education, Jennifer decided to pursue a career as a children's librarian. However, she never forgot what happened that night. Each day felt like a hunt for the criminal. Could be anyone. This could be our neighbor. This could be someone at the post office, someone at the grocery store. If he watch and laugh, is he going to come back and finish me off? Fortunately, Jennifer met a guy named Jonathan, and for the first time in many years, she trusted a man, and they fell in love. However, at the same time, the trail of her attacker grew colder. The chances of him being found were slim, and the case showed no progress despite being passed from one investigator to another. 18 years after that dreadful night, Jennifer received a phone call. I got a phone call that Detective Tim Cromie would be taking over my case and he wanted to meet with me. Tim Cromie promised to do everything possible to catch the criminal, and Jennifer believed him. And I told her, said Jennifer, I will do whatever I can do in my power till the end of my career to get you the answer that you. Tim and Richard discovered the significant amount of evidence collected on the day Jennifer went missing and immediately after she was found, with Jennifer's underwear being particularly crucial, as well as the perpetrator's shirt and underwear. They sent a DNA sample found on the clothing to Quantico, Virginia. Although detectives knew that technology had advanced significantly in 19 years, they understood that the case's age meant it would not be a priority in the lab. Often work in cold cases. Time is your enemy. People forget, people move away, people die. This was one of the benefits of time in our case was the advances of technology in the DNA field. Despite a whole year passing, their work was rewarded. The man whose DNA was found at the crime scene was Dennis Earl Bradford. Who is that? The same man Jennifer had written down many years ago. It turned out that the 8-year-old girl had been incredibly accurate in her descriptions. Jaffer was 8 years old, on pain medication, couldn't speak, and hand wrote down, he said his name was Dennis. At that point, it was monumental that this girl was so accurate. Of course, later we found out how accurate she was on everything. Dennis Bradford, 39, lived in North Little Rock, Arkansas, and his DNA was logged into the national database following an assault on a woman he met at a bar in 1996. Although sentenced to 12 years in prison, he only served 4. On February 4, 2000, Dennis was conditionally released. Less than a year later, police arrested Bradford for driving under the influence less than half a mile from his home. He remarried and worked as a welder until his arrest in 2009. Tim Cromie and Richard Renison investigated the link between the suspect from North Little Rock, Arkansas, and the small town of Dickinson, Texas. It turned out that the man had been arrested in Dickinson in 1987, 3 years before Jennifer's attack. At that time, he had 2 addresses within 2 miles of Jennifer and Elaine's apartment. To confirm his identity as the kidnapper, detectives requested a 19-year-old photo from his driver's license. When they saw the picture, they were stunned. He looked like a copy of the composite sketch created with the help of 8-year-old Jennifer. A yes told her that no. I didn't tell her. Obviously, it's best you are. But I think you would, if you were to see her, I think you need to when pre-heard. I really did. I did too. You are. Yeah, for fear of what can Susan. But I'm that. Oh good. You're a weapon. Yeah. Well then. Oh well, yeah, don't let Diego fall over. I a tray of Harley or Chasm. You're worrying about Tune's Dennis Earl Bradford was arrested on October 19, 2009. He insisted he didn't know Jennifer, couldn't recall why he had stopped near her apartment, and couldn't comprehend why he had treated her so cruelly. Dennis also revealed an interesting detail that investigators didn't know. After the attack, he was overwhelmed with guilt, and he attempted suicide with a shotgun. Bradford wanted to pull the trigger, but changed his mind. Afterward, he was admitted to the psychiatric ward, which happened to be the same hospital that Jennifer was still in. Even at that time, he was so close to her. Immediately after the interrogation, detectives informed Jennifer that the criminal they had been searching for 19 years was arrested. Though he never met her face to face, Reese's mother was good friends with Tiffany's mother. Reese even called Kathy shortly after Tiffany's death and shared condolences for her untimely death. But once again, Reese would elude justice as police were unable to gather any clues to link him with Tiffany's murder, and the case went unsolved for quite some time. In 2015, investigators finally got a breakthrough in Tiffany Johnson's case. By then, DNA technology had advanced massively. A DNA swab that was taken from the state medical examiner's office during the autopsy of Tiffany was sent to the lab for DNA testing. The DNA profile got a hit in the Cody's database and implicated William Reese in the crime. In September of 2015, William Reese was charged in Oklahoma City with the 1997 kidnapping and murder of Tiffany Johnston. But just before his trial was set to begin, in an unexpected twist, he started confessing to other crimes in an attempt to cut a deal with the prosecution. Eluded the police. They've lived for 90 years, but a shades of the truth. Already suspecting him in the murder of Laura Smither and the disappearances of Jessica Kane and Kelly Cox. Detectives put a bunch of photos of the three victims before him. He immediately accepted responsibility, but continued to deny any sexual motive behind the crimes. What is it? Well, thou really expected me to embed it, wilt it? Is the end of the word? I'm in. Yeah, it's a hack. I leave India in a while, and he's a little bit of a... He also agreed to show investigators to the site where he claimed the remains of Kelly and Jessica were buried on the condition that they would not seek the death penalty. In April of 2016, Reese led the investigators to a site in Houston Pasture where human remains were found after several days of digging. The remains were later confirmed by the Harris County Medical Examiner's offices as belonging to Jessica Kane. From there, the search moved through burial site in Brazoria County, where they found another set of human remains. Through dental records, the remains were positively identified as Kelly Cox. The trial for Tiffany Johnston's murder began in May of 2021 in the Oklahoma County District Court. On May 28, 2021, he was found guilty by the jury. On August 19, 2021, the judge sentenced him to death for Tiffany's abduction and murder. Following his conviction for murder in Oklahoma, Reese was extradited to stand trial in Texas in early March 2022 for the murders of Laura Smither, Kelly Cox, and Jessica Kane. He pleaded guilty to all three murders and was sentenced to life imprisonment in June 2022. Here's an old saying in the law: justice delayed is justice denied. Justice will not lead the light any lower in this case. I sit with you to do it, for families waited for decades to get answers regarding the fate of their loved ones. While the person responsible for these crimes selfishly kept these secrets to himself, it's saddening to see that he would only give these poor families the answers they so desperately needed to suit his own personal needs. We can only hope that the families can finally begin the healing process and find comfort in being able to give their loved ones a proper burial after all these years. They encountered the wild guy in the wild place at the One-Tie. Thank you for joining us on this journey into the depths of unsolved mysteries. Cold cases not only challenge our understanding of the past, but also ignite our curiosity and determination for answers. Remember to subscribe to stay updated on our latest investigations. And if you have any information regarding the cases we've covered, don't hesitate to reach out. Together, we can shed light on the shadows of the past and bring closure to those who seek it. Until next time, stay vigilant, stay curious, and never stop seeking the truth.